A large percentage of homicides in North America are committed each year by a family member. In the United States, an average of 18% of homicides are committed by a family member, and in Canada, nearly one-third of homicides, 32%, are committed by a family member. This week we're going to look at a case that is almost textbook in nature, but that took investigators many, many years to solve because, as we know, oftentimes there is a disparity between suspicion and actual cold, hard truth. This case centers around a woman who appeared to many to be a gold digger who sunk her teeth into a wealthy man, decided that wasn't enough, and then sunk her teeth into another man. And the end result is that she and that second man are now in prison for life for murder. Hello, my name is Lance, and welcome to episode 160 of Gone But Never Forgotten, The Murder of Bill McLaughlin. William Francis McLaughlin, better known as Bill, was born on October 12th of 1939 to his parents John and May McLaughlin. Bill is considered a man who rose up from humble beginnings and truly became what we know today to be a self-made millionaire. Bill served in the military as a Marine, and he then went on to earn his degree in biological engineering from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. He would then go on to achieve a Master's of Business Administration. When Bill was finished his schooling, he entered the medical field as a sales associate for a dialysis products company, and he then would go on to work as such for a heart valve company. From there, Bill went on to start his own company, which began with very humble beginnings inside of a garage. That company would invent a new type of dialysis catheter, and he then sold that company and took on several business partners for a new venture that would later net him millions. That group of partners would go on to invent Plasma Cell C, which is a medical device that is used to separate blood and plasma before the blood is then returned to the donor. Plasma Cell C was the flagship product of McLaughlin's company, which was called Hemascience Laboratories. Plasma Cell C would be sold for tens of millions of dollars in 1986, and the device would become the standard in healthcare, and it is still used to this day. Bill would then go on to develop a love for flying, earning his own pilot's license, and he also developed a love for firearms and did have a large collection of guns. Bill would also go on to marry a woman named Susan, and the two would have 3 children, whose names were Kevin, Jenny, and Kim. Kevin and Jenny lived in San Diego, and Kim lived in Tokyo, where she worked as a teacher. The marriage between Bill and Susan would last for 24 years, and then, as the family would later put it, the marriage ended in a divorce that, as you can imagine, ended in a litigious divorce because of the amount of money and property that the family had amassed. Bill was known by most people as a loving man and a loving father. Everyone that was close to the family said that the 3 children were the center of his world and that he would do anything for them. There was, however, a side of Bill that seemingly stayed in the office for the most part. As is true of most millionaires, Bill was very cutthroat when it came to his business and his money, and he did have a bit of a reputation for not necessarily treating people with respect when it came to business. We will touch on that a little bit later. In 1991, after the divorce from Susan, Bill would come across an ad in the Penny Saver that caught his eye. The ad said, quote, "I know how to take care of my man if he knows how to take care of me," unquote. The headline on that ad said, quote, "Wealthy men only," unquote. It was clear that the woman that had placed the ad knew precisely what she wanted, and she was not willing to waste her time on anything less. A photo of the woman accompanied the ad, and Bill was completely taken by her beauty. And so he picked up his phone, and he called the number that was attached to the ad. The woman who had placed the ad was named Nanette. Nanette had been born in Chicago, but she had grown up in Phoenix and graduated from high school in 1983. From there, she would go on to marry a man named Kevin Johnston. Her and Kevin would have 2 children together, and the family moved to Orange County in 1991. That same year, though, Nanette and Kevin would separate, and within months, Nanette had placed that ad in the Penny Saver, and she had moved in, with her children part-time, to Bill's massive Newport Beach home. When Nanette and Bill started dating, Bill's daughters immediately did not like her. They saw her for what she truly was, a gold digger. Nanette moved into Bill's home, and she was immediately hired on by Bill as a bookkeeper, something that she seemingly wasn't even particularly qualified for. She was paid $1,000 a month, which would be approximately $2,000 a month in today's dollars, and she obviously also received free room and board since she was living with Bill. Over the 3 years that Nanette and Bill dated, she managed to wiggle herself into and integrate herself into seemingly every piece of Bill's immense finances, and she was eventually even listed on the deed to one of Bill's properties. She also was listed as the sole beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy on Bill's life. Nanette also started to embezzle tens of thousands of dollars from Bill by writing checks to herself. That started in January of 1994, and it seemed that Bill trusted Nanette through and through and did not have anyone to double-check what she was doing with his finances. Nanette would later say in interviews that the relationship between herself and Bill wasn't the most intense, but that she did love him. Theirs was seemingly a relationship born out of different needs. As we saw, Nanette was looking for someone to pay for her life and a safe place to raise her children, while Bill was likely looking for companionship and someone to share his home and wealth with. Nanette said that Bill had always been a good man to her, and that he had accepted her children as his own, and he had treated them very well. However, for whatever reason, Nanette clearly needed and wanted something else as well. In 1994, she met a man named Eric Naposki while she was working out in a posh gym in the Orange County area. The two seemingly fell for one another, even though Eric was aware that Nanette was living with Bill. Nanette and Eric were often seen at the gym hugging and kissing one another. And so started the love triangle. It appears that Bill knew about Eric, but was led to believe that Eric and Nanette were just friends, and also Eric knew about Bill, but believed that Nanette and Bill were more business partners than anything else. Eric, for his part, was a large man. He was 6'2", and he weighed 240 pounds, and Eric had lived and breathed football for his entire life. He'd grown up in New York, and he'd played Pop Warner football as a child, and he turned into a powerhouse of a young man and a football player when he was in high school. In high school, he played both as a linebacker and as a running back, and he led his team to an almost undefeated season. In his senior year of high school, he scored 14 touchdowns and gained over 876 yards on offense, while netting over 100 tackles on defense. Because of his proficiency at the game, Eric received multiple scholarship offers from universities across the United States, but he ultimately chose to take the full scholarship that was offered to him from the University of Connecticut. While he was attending there, he also got married and he had 2 children. In 1988, Eric signed with the New England Patriots, but his career did not go the way that he wanted, and he only played in 5 games over 2 seasons, and he was then traded to the Indianapolis Colts, where he played for 1 season, and then did not receive a contract offer. Eric would then go over to Europe and make an attempt to revive his career there, and he did become a star for the Barcelona Dragons, and he led the team in tackles. By 1994, though, he knew that his football career was at its end, and that his NFL dreams were not going to come true, and so he returned to Orange County as a retired athlete, and he started to do work as a private security guard. Later, in 1994, he took a job working at a nightclub that was very close to Bill and Nanette's home, just 2 minutes' walk away. He took that job just 3 weeks before Bill's murder. The date of that act was December 15th of 1994, and on that day at 5:25 p.m., Bill had flown his small plane into Orange County Airport from Las Vegas, and when he arrived home, he saw that Nanette had left him a note that said that she was going out of town to watch her son play in a soccer tournament. Inside of the house were only Bill and his son Kevin, and between 9:05 and 9:11 p.m., someone had used a brand new, unused key to gain access to the home through Bill's front door, and they found Bill in the kitchen, making a sandwich, and they pumped 6 bullets into his chest. A 911 call would soon come in not terribly long after that, and the person on the other end of the line was Kevin, Bill's son. Kevin had a very serious speech impediment from a recent car accident that was also the reason that he was again living under Bill's roof as he attempted to recover. And so all that the 911 operator could surmise from that call was that shots had been fired in the coastal conclave of Balboa Coves. When police arrived at the scene, they were very quickly understanding that Kevin's father, Bill, had been the victim of a shooting, and that he had been shot several times. At the scene, investigators found a very bloody scene, and yet they noted that there were no footprints at all left behind. All that they did find was 6 9mm bullet casings that were spread out across the kitchen floor, and they also found the freshly cut key that had been used to unlock the front door and gain access to the home. They also noted that seemingly nothing inside of the home had been touched or stolen, and in such a posh neighborhood, that struck them as strange. Investigators also believed that the number of shots that had been fired from close range were indicative of a crime of passion that had a lot of emotion behind it and a personal motive. It was very obvious that 6 shots from close range would not have been needed for murder. As mentioned, Kevin had been living inside of the home, and he told investigators that the two had eaten together, and then he had gone upstairs to his room, and that when he had heard the shots fired, he had rushed downstairs and found Bill and called 911 immediately. As you can imagine, Kevin became an early person of interest in the case because he had been the only person that was present at the time. Investigators quickly found out, though, that Kevin had fallen into drug and alcohol addiction after his accident to help him cope with the changes to his life and the pain that he was in. And Bill had recently told Kevin that he needed to get help with his addictions or he would need to leave the home. Kevin had skipped an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting on the day of the murder, and he also did tell investigators that Bill was an avid gun collector. Inside of Bill's safe, the investigators found a 9mm semi-automatic handgun that would have been very much akin to the one that would have fired the bullets that took Bill's life. Investigators would conduct a gunshot residue test upon Kevin to see if he had fired a gun. That would come back negative the following day, and that removed Kevin as a suspect in the case. While the scene was being processed, Nanette pulled up into the driveway and she said that she had been shopping, and of course also relayed that she had been at her son's soccer tournament out of town. Her ex-husband would confirm that Nanette was indeed at the tournament, and store receipts and merchandise proved that she had been shopping. Nanette told police that Bill had just recently proposed marriage to her and that her children were with their father at the time. Immediately, Nanette told the police that she feared for her safety in light of what had happened to Bill, and she asked to be escorted to another residence that Bill owned, and she was escorted there. Bill's 2 daughters would arrive the following day, and they relayed that the divorce between Bill and Susan, as mentioned, was litigious, and every one of them found it very difficult. But detectives quickly found that Susan had been in Hawaii at the time of the murder, and the courts had ruled that Bill would have to pay for her home in Hawaii and also pay her $300,000 per year as a part of the divorce. Thus, it seemed certain that Susan did not have a motive. Bill was worth more to her alive than dead. Detectives then started to look outside of the family and into Bill's business colleagues, and they of course learned that Bill had a take-no-prisoners kind of attitude. He had even named himself as the single patent owner on the plasma cell C, even though he did have a co-worker on the project. The co-worker's name was Hal, and investigators found that Hal had recently sued Bill, seeking for his share of the royalties from the plasma C-cell. The court case had ended not too long before Bill's murder, and the outcome was that the courts had ruled in Bill's favor, and on top of that, they had ruled that Hal owed Bill approximately $9 million because of the lawsuit. Bill had shared with others in light of the ruling that he was afraid of repercussions from Hal, and even afraid for his life. When investigators looked into Hal, though, they found that Hal had an airtight alibi, and he too was cleared as a suspect. From there, the investigation turned to Nanette. On December 20th, just 5 days after Bill's murder, police started to surveil Nanette at the beach house, and a week after Bill's murder, she was seen passionately kissing another man who, of course, was Eric Naposki. It would also be relayed to police that Bill's funeral, Nanette's 9-year-old son had been telling people that his mom's boyfriend was a football player. Investigators, of course, had their radar going off with this information, as it certainly is not the norm for people to move on so quickly after the murder of their significant other. They started to also look into Eric and found that he had an outstanding traffic warrant, and so he was arrested on that warrant. Eric was taken into the Newport Beach Police Department, and it was there that he told investigators that he had believed that Bill and Nanette were just platonic business partners, and that as a part of that relationship, Bill had been allowing Nanette to live in his home. Eric didn't believe that there was anything resembling a relationship between the two. He did not have a solid alibi at first for the night that Bill was murdered, and police wondered if Eric was lying and trying to play them. Investigators did catch Eric in a lie very early on when they asked him about firearms, and initially he told them that he didn't own any guns, but later changed his tune and noted that he did own a 9mm semi-automatic that he had given to a friend. When investigators tried to check that story, the friend denied that Eric had given him the weapon. Nanette's ex-husband also was interviewed a second time, and this time he confirmed that Nanette again had been at the soccer game, but he also noted that Eric had also been at the game with her. That was a strange detail because neither he, nor Nanette, nor Eric had mentioned that in previous statements. In January of 1995, investigators received a warrant to search Eric's home, and when they arrived there, the door was opened and answered by Nanette. The two would again be interviewed separately, and Eric mentioned that Bill had previously raped Nanette, while in another room, Nanette admitted that she and Eric were friends with benefits and said that Bill was aware of their arrangement. Investigators didn't believe either of those revelations. Both were seen as the potential suspects in the case. However, there was just not enough evidence to arrest either one of them. A short time after that, there was a break in the case when it was determined that Nanette had forged large checks and drained close to $500,000 from Bill's accounts after his death. One check in particular for $250,000 was made out to her and dated for one day before Bill had been murdered. Nanette was charged with fraud, and she was found guilty and sentenced to 1 year in jail and would be released on December 23rd of 1996. In that time, she and Eric split up as well. Unfortunately, even the fraud was not enough evidence to arrest Nanette or Eric for the murder of Bill without connective evidence, and the murder case went cold and would remain that way for more than a decade. In 2008, Larry Montgomery, who was a retired investigator with the Orange County's District Attorney's Office, took a fresh look at the case and the evidence, and he reviewed all of the recorded interviews that were linked to the case. One of the interviews that he came across was an anonymous tip that had come in 1998 from a woman. The woman had said that her neighbor, Eric Naposki, had said that he wanted to kill Bill. Larry went out of his way to track down this woman behind the anonymous tip, and he was able to find her. Larry found that over the years, the woman's obvious fears of turning in a potential killer had subsided, and Eric had also moved away. But she was now willing to confirm the details that she had given on the anonymous tip that Eric had spoken of wanting Bill dead. In another recorded call, Nanette had told a business owner that she was coming into money and that she wanted to invest in his company. She had been unemployed at the time, and so investigators saw that as an obvious sign that she knew that something was coming financially. That call had been made just before Bill had been murdered, and she knew for a fact that she would receive $1 million from Bill's life insurance. After a deep look and retracing evidence and statements, Nanette was arrested in California, and Eric was arrested in Connecticut, and both were charged with first-degree murder in May of 2009, nearly 15 years after Bill had been murdered. The prosecutor would allege that Nanette was the mastermind behind the murder and that she had convinced Eric to kill Bill so that the two could be together and collect a substantial amount of money. The prosecution pointed out that Nanette stood to receive the beach house, the life insurance money, and approximately $150,000 from Bill's will. They succinctly pointed out also that Nanette was very driven by money, as shown by her personal ad that Bill had answered, and also the fact that she had gone to jail for fraud for writing fake checks to herself in Bill's name. Nanette, of course, said that she did not kill Bill and that she had needed him to be alive to continue on with the lifestyle that she was used to living. She said that the real way that she insured herself money was by having Bill alive. The best evidence against Eric was the fact that he had lied to police from the very beginning. First, about owning a gun at all, and then about giving that gun to a friend. That obviously led investigators to know that Eric was able to lie at will to them, and so nothing he said was taken as truth. When Eric was asked why he had lied to police in the beginning, he said, quote, I just didn't want to talk about it, because if I wasn't at the scene and I wasn't in Newport, then I couldn't have killed this guy, even if I had a bazooka," unquote. Bill McLaughlin was 55 years old when he was murdered, and he had amassed a $55 million fortune. Eric would go on trial first, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder in 2011. After he was found guilty, he went to the prosecution and told them that Nanette had indeed orchestrated the entire murder-for-hire plot against Bill, and he said that the killer had used his gun. He said that he had not fired the weapon at Bill, not once. He then went on to say that he had been in the room when the plot was created, and that the killer and Nanette had then gone behind his back and made arrangements that he did not know about. He said that they had left him out of the plot. For me, this is ludicrous. This man goes 15 years without saying a word, and then he's found guilty, and he decides to speak up and say that he knew things. First of all, I wonder why, if he was telling the truth, which is debatable for sure, he did not attempt to garner a plea deal for throwing Nanette and the other person under the bus. Second of all, he admitted that he was a co-conspirator and an accessory to murder in the case, regardless, and that meant that he was still guilty. Nanette would then go on trial, and she was found guilty in January of 2012 of first-degree murder, and also guilty of the special circumstance of committing murder for financial gain. Both Nanette and Eric received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Years after her conviction, Nanette said that she would have never killed Bill or had him killed, and that she would probably still be with him today if he was still alive. She said that she enjoyed her arrangement, and she had no reason to kill him or have him killed. She had everything that she'd ever wanted in that life. Eric, too, had continued to steadfastly say that he is not guilty of the murder of Bill. Eric is now serving time at Ironwood State Prison, and he says that he has not spoken to Nanette since, and Nanette is serving time at the Central California Women's Facility, where she works training service dogs through a program that's called Little Angels. She has said that helps with she helps with the service dogs because she's making a difference, and it helps her to cope with the fact that she is not with her children. Bill's family have said that they long believed that the murder would not ever be solved, and that they are trying now to move forward with their lives. His daughter Kim said, quote, "Packard and Naposki's lives have been taken away from them, and hopefully they're thinking about what they did. What I miss most about my father is just having him as a friend, and I know he'd be very proud of us and the choices that we're making, and so it's hard to not have him be able to share that with us here on Earth. We miss him dearly," unquote. This case certainly makes you think, doesn't it? Seems that for all intents and purposes that the relationship between Nanette and Bill was, if not ideal to most, it was functional. Both parties seemed to be getting what they wanted. Bill had a new family and a companion, and Nanette had all of the money that she could ever want, and yet she wanted more. Whether Bill knew it or not, she wanted more, and in the end she was part of planning this murder so that she could get all of it. It's frightening to think that one day you may believe that everything in life is going all right, and then in a moment you go from reading a note from your partner telling you where she is to being shot multiple times and having your life come to an end. The other thing that's bothersome is that if you believe Eric at all, there may have been a third party involved in this murder, and yet that person has seemingly and not ever been named. One has to wonder, too, if there is more to that story. That is where we will leave this one and come to an end of another episode. I want to remind you that there are a plethora of Patreon-exclusive episodes available at patreon.com/GBNF podcast, and that you can follow along there or anywhere on social media if you like. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to give it a follow, give it a like, and give it a rating, and tell your friends. I'll see you next week, back once again as we cover more true crime, and I hope that in the meantime your life goes well and you continue to be better. Have a wonderful week.